Nobody respects or appreciates a victim or a buck passer. And if you can look at yourself and legitimately say, well, when X happens to me, I'm looking for who else caused it. You're not looking internally in the mirror. Probably a good indication that you should stay away from entrepreneurship, because the entrepreneurs that I see that are successful, they own things that they don't even have to own, because they're in the mindset, I am responsible for my entire world. Anything that happens around me, I'm responsible for it. And they go out of their way to take on a massive amount of responsibility that most people will not even think to even try and justify or find any way of holding themselves accountable and responsible. And I think that's a cornerstone for being a really successful entrepreneur, is that you are willing to take on that responsibility, and you're willing to hold yourself accountable, that you don't need other people to hold you accountable, because the buck stops at you. As an entrepreneur, there is no passing the buck, and if you do, it's the surest way to lose respect.
It's going to be really inspirational to hear in many ways how you are where you are today. So if our audience could just get a little bio from you, Jason, just from your words, that'd be really awesome.
Very much a blue collar background. I got into mass manufacturing at a pretty young age, and I was looking to break that glass ceiling, and ran to be a union rep, and won my first union election inside of Chrysler. And 30 days after I was elected, my son was diagnosed with cancer. 30 days before re-election, he passed after several relapses, and I needed something for my brain to wrap around. So I threw myself into entrepreneurship. And 6 months after my son passed, I opened up Coffee Junkies and exited Chrysler about a year later. And then about 8 years later, I wanted to take all of the lessons that I had learned and apply it to a new brand. So I created Pizza Junkies in a test kitchen. And let's just say I wanted to continue testing, and Pizza Junkies got off the ground so well that I wondered what it would look like as a combination of a dual brand under one roof. So I moved Pizza Junkies into the main operation. And it took me about a year to figure out how they would actually work and perform well together. But 2015 was when I put them under one roof together. And I have been working towards mastering that duplication and moving towards franchising, which it took about a year to get all of our documentation together. But that's the stage that I'm in now, the beginning stages of bringing my true vision to life, which was turning Coffee Junkies and Pizza Junkies into national brands.
So it's about, what are we at, 2000? So you're well over, what you started Coffee Junkies 2005, 2006. So about 16 years of Coffee Junkies, and Pizza Junkies is, what are we at? That's over a decade as well, about the same thing.
Just slightly shy. That's per se. Coffee Junkies, I think, will turn 17 this November. I started Pizza Junkies January of 2014. So, 8 years?
That's really inspirational, Jason, that you were able to turn what someone would consider the most tragic moment of their entire life, and instead of going, you hear a lot of people, you don't know what to do in that situation. I don't know what I would do in that situation. And for you to have applied you changed routes in life, you left this job you worked hard at, and switching gears and going into that, and I imagine you put a lot of your mind into your work and building this thing, and it was able to help you in grieving and in this grieving process, because grief is something that when you have to go through it, it's like only people who have gone through it understand that you got to just do work or really dissolve. The idle mind is the devil's playground in many ways. And so,
And you hit the nail on the head there. That was that. A lot of people, like, it's one of those, you build it and they will come. I didn't build it for people to come. I built it because I needed something for my brain to wrap around, because I feared what would happen to an idle mind. It was one of those where I went from working on the floor, and like I said, a proud manual labor worker. But when I went to a union rep, I went to representing 500 people, and really able to use my brain. And when I lost my election, at the same time that he passed, my brain was very, like, unutilized, and it started to throw me into a depression, and I could see that. And I've been a big believer that everybody's going to have problems in life, but you work through your problems. And I had just spent the last 3 years mentally working at a higher level. And then all of a sudden I had to go back to the floor and go right back to the manual labor, and something that didn't require a lot of brain power. So I threw myself into entrepreneurship because I knew that it would give my brain something to attach, and gravitate towards, and get back into the problem solving that is so big with entrepreneurship. It was a necessity for me to just maintain sanity.
right, and that's not uncommon for a lot of people. What's a little unfortunate is sometimes one thing leads to another thing and another thing, and you lose yourself, and you think back to where things kind of went south for you, and where whatever it is. And I don't know if this was something that like you said, you were a working class blue collar guy. You put your time in, you had a great position, and you changed routes and decided to do the entrepreneur thing, which is, you're not working 40 hours, you're working 80 hours, you're working more than 80 hours. The clock just ticks, and you're awake on the clock doing it. And I think it was the right choice. I mean, you don't need to hear it, I'm sure, but I think that was that much time and effort you needed to put into something. A lot of people say, their business is their child. There's a lot to that, and it takes a lot of work to build that. And so I have a lot of appreciation for that, Jason. That's amazing. So Coffee Junkies, you start that in 2005, and what was that like starting off for you? What was the beginnings like for that?
I mean, there was a lot of passion in it, and I've told a lot of people that, I mean, like, successful entrepreneurship is actually quite boring. But the beginning stages, where you're creating and you're testing and finding out what doesn't work and what does work, that's really exhilarating, and it's fun to play with. But it's also a mental roller coaster, and it's a roller coaster on your bank account too, because in that testing, you're spending money not knowing if you're going to get the returns. And then it's when you finally find that secret sauce, and you write the systems, and you develop that consistency, and you find a winning recipe. That's where it's not exciting and exhilarating, but it is what is success. And there's a certain calm that comes to more money in the bank account this month than was in last month. And I went through many, many years, I mean, a good first decade of really struggling financially, to where when I got to the point where I had a winning recipe, and I wasn't on that roller coaster, the exhilaration wasn't there. But then I understood that, I mean, part of successful business is finding something that works, and then repeating the process over and over again. Because I didn't leave Chrysler to give myself a job. I wanted to see how big I could build something. I wanted to be respected as an entrepreneur and a business person. And then that was the realization that boring calm was what actually made you feel like you had made it, because it was operating and functioning without my hands on every last minute. Entrepreneurship is a challenge. And when you get past that roller coaster is when you feel like you've actually achieved some level of success.
Right, and I don't know if it's just the fact that you being a working class guy already and working up your positions, but you proved that you showed that and when you're running your own thing, it's like you're running the whole thing, and you have no time for anything, and all those mistakes you made to prevail forward, it's like that's like you said, that consistency that sustained you along the way. I mean, what people aren't that consistent, and you had to be consistent to get into your position in Chrysler. So you knew with the entrepreneurship, I don't, you like you. I mean, you haven't said this, but I don't know if you how natural your entrepreneurship was. But a lot of people it's natural, some people it's not. But for you, it's like I'm putting in the time, and I'm gonna keep doing it, and then at some point it's gonna work. And sometimes it's like that's what you got to do, and it looks like that's what you did, and you're reaping the rewards. There was no shortcuts. This wasn't you didn't just stumble upon
No,
this.
and
This
that's
is
what there
everyday
was no
work.
shortcuts and there was no stumbling upon. It was honestly bullheaded brute force stubbornness. But I will say that I mean, when I look back, like I never learned, and nor that I want to learn the definition of quit. And when it come to leaving Chrysler, it was like, yes, I was leaving quote unquote security, but I learned a long time ago. I mean, change is inevitable, and what you think is security is actually a fallacy. So I never depended on security. I've always depended on my willingness to work. And when I left Chrysler, it was I don't need to punch a clock to work. And I knew that in entrepreneurship, if I'm in charge of my own thing, well, then I'll work my own schedule. And I didn't realize at the time that when I left Chrysler for one word: freedom. I wanted to be free to do my own thing, knowing that I didn't need that to punch that clock to work. What I didn't realize is it was for the first decade, what I did was build my own jail. I got to the end of the decade and had to remind myself, hey, you built this jail. You are free to walk out of it as long as you did well enough building the business that you can walk out of it and it will continue to serve customers and actually thrive. And I mean, I went through trials and tribulations where I tried to back off from the business and found out that my systems weren't strong enough, and I had to dig back in and tear them apart and rebuild them. And it was a continual backing away to find out, did I build something that runs without my hands on, or do I still have yet more work to do? And it's definitely been an evolution over the last 16, 17 years.
Security is a fallacy. I hope that people listening to that caught that, and it takes a lot of bravery. I don't know if it was this traumatic moment that you had, but whether you had these thoughts to start a business already, whether at some point you thought, I already have a lot of time in this, I'm already reaching this point, but maybe I should start my own thing. Maybe there's something out there that I've always known I can try to do. It's like, but I get so much from this, but it's all my time. It's hard to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I like that people say that you can be in the dream world, but when your reality's messed up, you got to be logical and get that situated and then work from there. But you left that and you changed. You started with one system, and I don't know how many systems you've gone through, but it's an ever evolving system that has brought you to this consistent success that brings you forth the fruits that you plant, the seeds you plant, and
Yeah,
they just
then
keep
that's the
on
thing
coming.
is that when I left Chrysler, it was because I had invested all of my time in Chrysler, but I invested my life savings into creating Coffee Junkies, and I realized neither one of them was getting my full attention, and something had to give. And I mean, people that you protect to avoid loss more than you're willing to risk for gain. But I was looking at it as neither one of them was getting my full attention. I was either going to lose time served in the plant, or I could see that if I didn't devote more attention to the business, I was going to lose all of the time and money that I had invested in the business itself. And I just, one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got, and I got it from a guy that was doing a side hustle inside Chrysler, was he said, bet on yourself. And I have been willing to bet on myself because life is always going to have problems. And as long as you're willing to work through them, you'll literally work through them. And that was what I realized when it come to building a business and systems, is that squeaky wheel gets the grease. So you build a system because you've got a squeaky wheel. Okay, well, as soon as you fix that bottleneck or fix that system, then you're going to have another squeaky wheel. And if you literally work your way all through your entire business fixing those squeaky wheels, inevitably you're going to come back around to the system that you first developed, and it's going to be the squeaky wheel all over again. So after 8, 10 years is when I realized my business at this point is continually tearing down and rebuild systems to grease the wheels, to fix the bottlenecks to the point where I'm keeping up with the demand of my business to keep the operation flowing. And then when it got to a point where I felt like I had a really good working system, that's when I opened up a proof of concept operation 50 miles away from home base to prove that I could take the concept into another area, that the systems were so strong that I could open up in another area and be successful. And that's what I did. And then once I did that, I was ready to start franchising in 2020. And then obviously that's when COVID hit, and it was kind of a let's brace and make sure that everything, that the systems are strong enough that we're actually going to survive. And then once we cleared that hurdle, that was when I felt like I had the proof of concept, and it was okay. Now it's time to actually start duplicating because I've got strong enough systems to survive.
Very awesome, very awesome. I'm not sure if you started to treat it like maybe a like a game for yourself, but you proved it to yourself with starting this other thing. You didn't have to do that, but you said, to myself, I'm going to prove to myself that this system is proven to work, and I'm going to do this. And I like that you say it. For you though, it's not anything but your willingness to work that'll get you to where you're going to get to, no matter what you read or you stumble across or whatever pamphlet version of life you have, sitting drinking coconuts. Like, you gotta work. Man's purpose is to work, and there's no, a lot of the thinking is wasted time, and a lot of the thinking is just like, get out there and do stuff, and you'll be fine. Most likely when the job's done, you feel a little bit better, because even alcoholics, I just saw this really interesting video about like a commercial in Thailand that illustrated alcoholism and the cure to it. And it was like, it showed one where a gentleman, a father, is just sitting there drinking, complaining, and his family's like losing it around him. And then the next video was the same person, but he's working, and he's working, but it shows like he's just working. But then he gets home and he's got the money and the family's happy, and it just shows that if you don't change anything, it never changes. And in this illustration, it showed like this guy it was just funny because it's just so long of him, like I think he was shoveling, and it's just a lot of it was like a looped shoveling, but it's like that's what it's gonna take to get you through whatever it is, the work, and the prevailing of the obstacle in front of you, and the bigger the obstacle,
Well, and that's
the
because there are some things that I have been seeing happening today and in this generation that I don't agree with, because I feel like there's a lot of people out there encouraging complacency, uh, and comfort. And personally, it's like life is not, quality of life is more important than life itself, and a body in motion stays in motion. I am that guy that, like, I wouldn't know what to do with myself if I didn't get up and work on something every day. It keeps my mind sharp, it keeps me physically sharp, and I don't want to deteriorate away. That's when you get sucked into the pharmaceutical system, and then your quality of life deteriorates. So I've long said that, I mean, I have an there's, some people live to work and other people work to live. And I mean, it's to each his own. And I don't, maybe there are times maybe when I envy it because my brain doesn't shut off. Like, that's been one of the things that I've had to overcome, is getting my brain to shut off, because I know that let's just say I'm motivated beyond the average individual, but it makes me feel whole when I'm working. And part of that journey in life is being fulfilled in what you're actually doing in the moment. And I mean, they say stopping to smell the roses, and I'm like, well, I work 7 days a week, and to me that is the smell of roses. And every once in a while I'll take a holiday, but if you gave me a 7 day vacation, I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
Definitely a blue collar working class man right there speaking for you guys.
It's just,
That's that blue.
I mean, and the thing is I don't, this country was built on literal blood, sweat, and tears, and that was only accomplished through work. And yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'm like, no, I we accomplish great things by working both mentally and physically. And I'm never going to advocate for complacency because there's not a whole lot of originality to be had left in the world, but there's still plenty of innovation, and that requires literally being sharp with your mind and then putting the muscle to it and actually building and creating. Uh, and that's what raises quality of life. That is literally moving forward and building and creating. And as a guy, I'm like, yeah, I want to build shit. I want to see how big I can build something because that's that entrepreneurial ambition in me that I don't overly think about this long-term legacy, but I do think about being a productive member of society and being able to look back on what I did and have a sense of satisfaction that the effort was worth it and that I built something that is self-sustaining that does not need my direct hands-on to function and continue to live every day.
Hey, and hats off to you for doing that because a lot of people, I don't know what it is, all you hear is people need work. There's nobody wanting to work and everybody's doing their own thing. But it's like you said, you're always changing the system. So if people are there, they don't want to, I don't know how they're first, I don't know if the media is clouding people's perceptions, but all it is feeding people to go after to do stuff. But there's no, the tool, it's just like the characters you are asked to idolize are just like they're not it's like they say look here but it's all here where you're really supposed to be looking, so it's almost like you gotta really see through the smoke and mirrors. And what would your advice be, Jason? You were going to say something and it was probably good, so I'll ask it after. What were
Well,
you going to
it's
say?
just that like government and politicians are master marketers, but it doesn't mean that their message is the best message for a society in general. I mean, I employ a lot of part timers. I had a 16-year-old literally stomp out of an interview because as a first time jobber, I was not willing to pay her $15 an hour to work. And it was like, this is totally the wrong mindset for moving a society forward, for moving for moving a civilization forward as a whole. And I just my background is one of having pride in your work. And I it's like when you make an employment agreement, okay, you're agreeing to a wage, but your work ethic is not based on that wage. Your work ethic is part of your character, is part of your reputation in life. And then if you don't like what you agreed to work for, okay, then you go back and you renegotiate. But I just seem that too many people are coupling one with the other of using it as an excuse for not putting forward effort. And I'm just the kind of person that your effort, your work speaks towards your character and who you are as an individual. And then if you have ambitions and you want to go out and make more money, well, then go out and make more money. But don't tie your personal efforts that speak about who you are to your wage, because whatever your wage is, you made that agreement when you stepped in to actually perform the work. And I'm just a big proponent that, especially in a day and age of social media, your reputation follows you everywhere. And I'm the kind of guy that I want to be proud of my reputation. I don't want to run from it. And you can always make more money. So it's not about the money. It's about your personal character and people being willing to trust and depend on you and your word. And that goes according to your work ethic and the results that you produce. And then as an entrepreneur, I'm just a big believer that you work hard and you put out a good product consistently, the money will come. But I think that principle applies outside of entrepreneurship in general. I think that's a personal quality. If you take pride in your work and you're a hardworking individual, sooner or later, the money is going to find its way to you. if you're monetarily motivated. Some people aren't monetarily motivated, and I can respect that.
Right, right. And sometimes they're not motivated until something else motivates them. Like, going to. I know a lot of people I've had on this show who have served life sentences for things they didn't even do, and that prison cell was not even enough for this guy to say, you know what, the bigger jail that I've been in was the mental prison of the life I led prior to this and what got me here. So like you said, if you can get all that stuff out of you and make yourself a competent person, and whatever trade you have. I don't know if you recommend somebody learn to trade, or to be even to be an entrepreneur, you got to have certain skills. You got to recognize certain skills, right? You got to be pretty I'm sure you had to come say, I'm pretty good at this, but this guy I know over here is good at this, so I might have to call this guy. I'm not sure if you did that or if you learned
No,
it
no,
all
no. I'm
yourself.
gonna be honest. I
But
mean, I think that a key trait of an entrepreneur is that you know a little about a lot, and then when you get to the problems that you have to solve, then you go find people that know a lot about a little, and they're better and they're smarter than you in what the problem that you're trying to solve. So you go out and find those people. But going back to what you said, look, if you're going to go to college and create a bunch of debt, well, then you should probably be trying to find your way into big business. If you want to work on your own, okay, well, then there's nothing wrong with learning good trades that are going to actually pay you well, because then you don't have all that debt hanging over you. Um, but I'm going to be honest. I mean, that's like where I say I'm a high school dropout. That, from what I've seen, that there's a certain commonality to that when it comes to entrepreneurs, and I think that that's got to do with they were not inside the school systems long enough to be programmed the way the school systems program you to be as an individual. Um, and I'm not going to deny that there's a certain something in me that I process risk differently than other people. It does not have that paralyzing effect on me the way that it does most people. So I think that there is a certain recipe for entrepreneurship and for the type of person that should or should not enter entrepreneurship. Um, because I'm going to be honest, I mean, the failure rate is 99%. And personally, I think at least half the people shouldn't have tried. But I think that, not that I'm trying to squash anybody's dreams, I think that you should be introspective and know who you are as an individual and understand the risks and responsibilities that you're taking on when you throw yourself into entrepreneurship. And if you know yourself well enough, well, then you might just very well come to the logical conclusion that maybe you want to be entrepreneurial inside of somebody else's system, because you don't want to take on all of the risk and the responsibility, because you recognize that it does create paralyzation in you, that you don't know how to work with that and move past it. Or maybe you want to be creative like an entrepreneur, but you just simply know you only want to be responsible for your own words and your own actions. But as an entrepreneur, you're ultimately responsible for everything. And then we go to the victimhood side of it. Like, nobody respects or appreciates a victim or a buck passer. And if you can look at yourself and legitimately say, well, when X happens to me, I'm looking for who else caused it. You're not looking internally in the mirror. Probably a good indication that you should stay away from entrepreneurship, because the entrepreneurs that I see that are successful, they own things that they don't even have to own, because they're in the mindset, I am responsible for my entire world. Anything that happens around me, I'm responsible for it. And they go out of their way to take on a massive amount of responsibility that most people will not even think to even try and justify or find any way of holding themselves accountable and responsible. And I think that's a cornerstone for being a really successful entrepreneur, is that you are willing to take on that responsibility and you're willing to hold yourself accountable, that you don't need other people to hold you accountable, because the buck stops at you as an entrepreneur. There is no passing the buck.
Wow. Wow. Jason, how do people get linked up with you on social media? How do they find you? I think that's a great place to leave it at. Let's give them the links to go ahead and find you.
Uh, I do that. I go through this with everybody, but I spell my name Jasan. So it's Jason Julius, and you can find me on most of the social platforms at Jason Julius. My YouTube is Double J TV. Double is the whole word, J is the single letter, and I do my video side of my podcasting, and I put that on the Double J TV on YouTube. But between that and Coffee Junkies and Pizza Junkies and all of its social media channels, generally all of that stuff is out there, and it's got my founder bio, and it links all in with each other. And admittedly, I still have a whole bunch of my social media that I've got pieces that I look at, and I know that it's not fully built out. And about like everything else, it's all work in progress.
That's right. That's right. And I'm glad people who are tuning in got to get to know you in this episode, Jason. Just a little bit, something short, but something nice. And when people invest into the brand, especially today, I think they start with the person and the mastermind behind it. So I think people are going to get a good look into who the man behind Coffee Junkies is, Pizza Junkies, and I'm excited to see what's next, Jason. So we would love to get you on again in the future.
Brother, absolutely. That's why I started the personal brand, because I knew in franchising, it's very much a partnership. And I knew that if I put myself out there as a personal brand, that I wanted people to gravitate towards me as far as a partner and resonating with me. And that's why I started putting all of the content out there, because I knew that it'd be a partnership. But thank you very much for having me on.
All right, you guys. Jasan Julius.
Mm-hmm.